Welcome to the Primo's Musings podcast.
Good evening. This is Sri here with a quick recap of the divisional or the wild card playoffs in the NFL. So let's go through with each of the games in order of when they happened. The first game, I was really shocked at this. This was the Texans hosting the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers coming off 11-7 season. They've been playing really well in terms of they've been playing well. They won four in a row going into the playoffs. The Houston Texans had already suffered a lot of injuries. They lost some very key players. So everything pointed to the Chargers winning easily, and the plan was to go to the Chiefs to set up the third matchup against the Chiefs this season. But as luck would have had it, the Texans seemed to be the better team, despite the fact that Stroud played amazing and Mixon was just great. Nico Collins came up huge with like 7 for 122. All around the place, they had good production. But meanwhile, the Chargers, Herbert, who's been really good this season. When I looked at his stats, he was actually one of the most consistent season that he had in a long time. And the one thing that he was doing was he was not making many mistakes this year, and I think that's what I thought would be enough for Justin Herbert this year. Because one of the things is that one of the knocks on him is that when they went and played the Jaguars, they had a 27 to nothing lead and they blew that game in Jacksonville. So when I looked at 2024, he actually had 23 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So great season. And then he had, when you look at the last three games, the week or last two games, week 16 and 17, he had 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, with an average rating of close to 120 passer rating. So I was of the impression that the Chargers would go in there. Chargers really laid a big egg against the Texans. He had 4 interceptions. Meanwhile, the Texans were solid throughout. I mean, obviously they had a pick six that was huge. The Texans actually outscored the Chargers, which I never thought I would say that. They had 429 yards in total offense with 261 passing, 168 rushing, and that's where the game is. And the only positive sign for the Chargers was Lad McConkey, who was their most consistent rookie, had 9 catches for 197 yards, including a 90-yard bomb. The the story that Justin Herbert has failed to win the playoffs again continues. Fortunately, the Houston Texans move on. And who do they face? They do face the uh, Kansas City, the Super Bowl, the two-time Super Bowl winner in Kansas City. And they have to travel all the way to Kansas City to play them. I know they recently played, but it's good to see this matchup. Whereas the next one was the Steelers and Ravens. Now, in this matchup, I knew going in that the Steelers would be a very tough matchup for them against the Ravens. The Steelers' momentum, when you looked at the momentum, they've lost 4 in a row. Even though Mike Tomlin has always had a winning season every time he's been in the Steelers. Wilson, again, 20 for 29, 270 yards, 2 touchdowns. Critical errors that he had. When I look at the where that fell through, I think the Steelers could not really run the ball. I mean, Najee Harris has 6 carries for 17 yards. And when you look at what the Ravens did, Lamar was 16 for 21 for 175, 2 touchdowns. That would serve them well when they play a team like the Chiefs or the Bills, because you need both sides of the ball. You need both the running game, but you need both the passing game as well. Derrick Henry, meanwhile, had 26 for 186, and Lamar Jackson himself has 15 for 181. And when you look at the total rushing yards, Baltimore almost had 300 yards in rushing alone, and the passing was just 165. Obviously, they outscored the Steelers 464 to 280. And when I look at it, Baltimore was just incredible. Their number of first down that they had, their third down efficiency, despite the fact that Steelers had more sacks than the Ravens. Again, when you look at it, the time of possession is a huge thing in these games, especially in the playoff games, when the time of possession is almost double. Baltimore had almost 40 minutes in time of possession, and Pittsburgh really had 20 minutes of time of possession, and that really showed in the game. Pittsburgh is a huge, I think, decision to make. I think it seems like Mike Tomlin is already going to be back, but something to looked at. The next one is the Broncos and the Bills. Now, when this game started, it looked like the Broncos definitely were going to be contending with the Bills. They were playing at Orchard Park, but they just marched down the field and scored a touchdown. And Bo Nix was excellent. He couldn't make a mistake. And he had Franklin, who had a huge touchdown. And the Broncos went up very quickly on the Bills at 7-0. But that was it. And Bills came back and won this game 31-7, chipped away from throughout the game, and they scored only 7 points. They were only up by 10 at halftime, so you felt that the Broncos were in the game. But once the Bills outscored them 11-0 in the third quarter, and in the fourth quarter they scored 10 more points, they had no chance at all against the Broncos. And when I looked at the team stats, I mean, the Broncos had 224 versus Bills had 471. And from a passing yard and even the rushing yard, the Bills really put out a great show, 210 rushing yards. Some common themes here when I look at it. Mixon had 100 yards. You had Baltimore having 299 yards. Then you have Buffalo having almost 210 yards. Really shows you that when it comes to the playoffs, you're definitely going to see you have to have a very balanced um, attack, both running and the passing. And of course, on the defensive side, you need to play very stout defense. And that's the story. So the Bills march on. Who do they get? The Bills now go and play the Ravens, or rather, the Ravens coming to Highmark Stadium in Western New York, and it's going to be a fun matchup. One of the things is that we knew going in that one of these two very good teams that were capable of beating the Chiefs are going to knock each other out. So something to be, for the Chiefs. All they're going to be playing is they're going to be playing the Texans. I mean, Texans are no pushovers. They have a great defense. D'Amico Ryan can bring the heat, and if they can run the ball with Mixon and Nico Collins and C.J. Stroud can show something out there, it's going to be interesting. Let's see if they can challenge it. So that's where we are with the AFC. You have the Texans playing on the Chiefs going to the Arrowhead Stadium, and then you have the Ravens going all the way to the Bills. So that's where we are, guys, in terms of the AFC round matchups. Now let's quickly pivot to the other two matchups that happened in the NFC, or three matchups in the NFC. Let's start with the one which happened yesterday, the Vikings and Rams. The Vikings definitely looked like a fish out of water when they played the Rams. The game was moved to Arizona due to the fires in LA, but the Vikings could not match up with the Rams. The Rams were thoroughly dominant. When I looked at what the Rams did, now, Stafford played okay, but at least in the first half, I don't think any Vikings defender got close to him. I mean, there were sometimes trying to rush six, but then there was sometimes trying to rush five. They couldn't really make a dent into the offensive line of the Rams. And from a standpoint of receiving, I mean, Stafford definitely spread the um, wealth around. Higbee, 5 for 58, was hurt. You had Puka Nakua had 5 for 44, and then Cooper Cup, Robinson, Kieran Williams. I mean, when you look at um, almost 8 receivers, more than 10 yards each, he definitely distributed the ball well. And that was the story. And then from a total yards, they were almost close to equal. Rushing yards was almost equal. It just came down to, even when you look at the Rams had worse third down efficiency. They ran less plays. At the time of possession, they were outscored in the time of possession, but there was one interception thrown by Sam Darnold and one fumble. But the key stat that you're going to see is the amount of sacks that the Rams had on Sam Darnold. It was 9 sacks, and that's not going to bode well for anything. I was very surprised. I thought of all the teams, the Vikings had solid offensive line, and that they didn't really come to play against the Rams yesterday. So the Rams move on, and who do they get? They travel all the way to Philadelphia to play against the Eagles. And the Eagles played against the Packers. Not an impressive game throughout the game when I looked at the stat, but Jordan Love, we were talking about it in the previous show. Jordan Love didn't have a great game. I know he was coming off some injury, but and he definitely was not in the best elements. 3 interceptions is not going to win you many games. And Josh Jacobs actually played well. I mean, he rushed his heart out. And there was one play where he dragged so many Eagles defenders almost to the goal line. So he played his part. I mean, he didn't get his 100 yards, but he played his part. The Rams, the Packers receivers really could not do much against the Eagles secondary. As far as the Eagles are concerned, again, there's been a lot of questions on Jalen Hurts. He didn't throw more than, I mean, he only threw for about 131 yards and 2 touchdowns. But then when you look at the Saquon Barkley had 25 for 119, again, continuing his impressive regular season performance. Hurts had some good rush. And when I look at the total team stats itself, the Green Bay actually had more yards than the Eagles. But again, when you have 3 interceptions and one fumble lost, you're not going to win many games, despite the fact that your third down efficiency was way better than the Eagles. And that's something that will concern me if I'm Eagles playing against the Rams. The Rams definitely are a high-powered offense. The Eagles may have to score point for point against the Rams. I mean, the Rams have a good passing attack, and they have good running attack too. And they're playing 9 sacks against the Minnesota Vikings. That's going to be something weighing in. So the Packers last year they were able to win against Dallas, and they almost beat the Niners, but the Eagles definitely the better team. Then we come to the best game of the playoffs so far in the wild card, which is the Commanders and Buccaneers. Going in, I knew this game was going to be very close, but the story of this is Jaden Daniels' impressive rookie performance. 268 yards, 2 touchdowns, also 13 for 36 he rushed. They didn't have a great rushing game uh, of the Commanders, but they were very efficient. I mean, McLaurin definitely had a great game, 7 for 89, and Brown actually had 5 for 89. So both these guys had good uh, catching, and Daniels definitely did a great job of distributing the ball. The Buccaneers, on the other hand, again, Baker Mayfield only threw for 18 times for 185 yards. Irving actually had very good rushing, 17 for 77. Mike Evans is Mike Evans. He had 7 for 92. But the rest of the receivers didn't really, except for McMillan, didn't really show up. So when I looked at it, this game came down to the wire. I mean, even from the yards, even though the Washington was 50 yards more than the Buccaneers, the passing yards and the rushing yards were very, I mean, Jaden was way better than Baker in this game, better, good first downs. In fact, this is one of the games that the Washington Commanders didn't even punt the ball throughout that. And of course, the Buccaneers had one fumble lost. No interceptions on both sides, no interceptions and no punts. That's never happened in a long time. So Washington definitely high flying right now, going into Detroit to play the Lions. So that's where we are with the NFL playoffs right now. Great game. It came down to the field goal, and you could see that the Washington kicker was definitely nervous. It was a doink, and that's how Mike Tirico called it. And Washington moves on. They've not won a playoff game since 2005. Just incredible story for Washington. Well deserved. And right now they get to play the Lions. So here is the divisional round we have. On Saturday at 4:30, you have the Texans and Chiefs. Then on Saturday at 8 p.m., you have the Commanders and Lions. Great matchup. Then on Sunday, you get to see the Rams and Eagles at 3 p.m. And on the divisional round, you see the Ravens and Bills at 6:30 p.m. And this is where we are, guys. I mean, it's going to come down to this. It's going to be fun playoffs right now. So looking forward to these playoffs. Great, like I said, kudos to the Commanders for getting a second field goal to win this game. The Eagles, like I said, they didn't look sharp, but they had enough to beat the Packers, thanks to the Packers. 3 turnovers. And then the Bills were too good for the Broncos. Good learning experience for Bo Nix. I'm sure they'll be back. Sean Payton will be back. And then the Texans was definitely the surprise. I mean, there's some key questions to be asked for the Chargers. I think with Jim Harbaugh coming in, you definitely knew that the defense was going to improve, but very disappointed with the way Justin Herbert played. Again, this is second straight playoffs that he's not really shown up. So that's where we are with this playoffs, and looking forward to the games this weekend. Thanks again for listening. Good night.
Thank you for listening. Primo will be back soon.